So I guess there's a couple of questions I'd like to pose to our friends here. And the first is not so controversial, but I think it'll be helpful to understand what the challenges are. Is what is the biggest obstacle that is preventing us from achieving this greater equality that we are dreaming of in your work? So, quel est l'obstacle principal qui nous empêche d'atteindre l'égalité qu'on veut? Et quelles sont les stratégies pour surmonter cet obstacle-là? So what are the strategies to overcome this obstacle? Si quieres, no, en español no, Pilar. So let's start off with that. It'll have to be in French or in English. Sorry.
Anybody?
Sure.
Well, I think the biggest obstacle right now is political will. I think that resolving many of these problems are actually quite easily within our grasp. And it's not true that we don't have the power or the means or the knowledge or the research or the networks to solve them. What we don't have is political will, and that's why we have expanding inequality. And I would say that is partly derived, at least in the food sector, from incredible corporate concentration and corporate capture of policy processes, so that governments have kind of lost the ability, not the ability, I correct myself, not the ability, but the will to confront corporate power, and have just gone along with them making the rules of the game, so that now we're in a situation, I mean, there's so many statistics that one could cite, but say just this one, that 96% of Canada's meat supply is controlled by 4 corporations, or 75% of the world's commercial seed supply is controlled by 3 companies. So this is extremely serious, and those corporations are excessively well organized at the international level, as I'm sure many people in this room can attest to, writing the words, writing the rules on trade and investment, and rewriting mining codes and agricultural investment rules and all of these things. So I think the loss of political will is directly related to corporate concentration and control.
Je peux? Oui. D'accord. Moi, j'aimerais prendre, pour cette question, j'aimerais prendre un exemple de ce qui s'est passé au Burkina dernièrement, en novembre. Vous savez qu'en octobre, il y a eu un soulèvement populaire qui a amené, je dirais, la fuite de notre président. Pourquoi ce soulèvement? Il y a toute la population qui s'est mobilisée comme une seule personne et qui a fait partir ce président. Pourquoi? Parce qu'il y avait trop d'inégalités. Les gens en avaient marre. On en avait ras-le-bol de tout ce qui se passait. Toutes les richesses du pays aux mains d'une élite, et le chômage, la faim, il n'y a pas d'eau, l'électricité, tout le monde était brimé. Et qu'est-ce qui a permis d'avoir ce résultat? C'est parce qu'il y a eu cette union. Qu'est-ce que nous oublions présentement? On voit qu'on n'a plus cette notion de bien commun dans nos habitudes. On a perdu ça de nos jours. C'est la notion de bien individuel. C'est pour moi seul, c'est voilà, tout tourné vers soi. On a perdu cette culture de l'intérêt général. Il faut qu'on travaille à revenir à ça. L'intérêt général n'est plus rien pour personne. On a perdu cette culture dans nos manières de faire. Et ce qui est plus chose, on pense savoir ce dont l'autre a besoin, sans tenir compte de ce que cette personne a au fond d'elle-même. L'obstacle à la solidarité, à l'égalité, c'est quoi? C'est tous ces manques-là. Le manque de bien commun, le manque de culture d'intérêt général, le manque de savoir, de tenir compte de ce que l'autre veut. Et surtout, le fait de vouloir évoluer individuellement. Tant que les gens ne se mettront pas ensemble, nous ne pourrons pas atteindre l'égalité. Il faut le voir en face et ne pas le fuir. Donc, j'aimerais, c'est ce que je voulais apporter.
Merci, Aline. For those of you who don't know, Aline is from Burkina Faso, and Compaoré, the president who was there for many, many years, wanted to change the constitution to continue to stay in power. And a great movement of people, over 1 million people, gathered in the streets and chased them out. There's still a movement that meets on a weekly basis, and it's direct democracy, and they're calling it le balai citoyen, the citizen's broom, sweeping away dictators. So, very interesting. Merci, Aline.
Merci.
I wonder, Pilar or Paul, would you have anything else to add? Paul's in the hot seat?
You want me to say first? You want to always go that order? I think maybe I put a talk in our country context about inequalities. In our country, what we see that unless the government changes the structure, the centralized military dominant structure, which exists in the constitution, there will be no equalities. Because the civil war started in Burma in the first place because of inequalities. There was discrimination against our ethnic indigenous people, you know. So this is a very fundamental issue that got to be, changed in Burma, and that has not changed. And it has been strengthened in this reform time. That is one. The second point is that we, indigenous people, ethnic people, we, look so much to the international communities, especially the Western democracies, that during the last 20 years and so time, people trying to, call for, more like kind of issues like sanctions, economic sanctions, not to support the military government, the dictatorship, because as I said earlier, that they spend all the monies to buy weapons, they sold natural resources like gas to Thailand and other countries. They don't even account for that kind of money in the country. They have overseas kind of accounts. And they buy, weapons, they attack ethnic peoples, like that. So that's why we managed to kind of work with the campaign groups in other countries, in US, in Europe, managed to, control, at least some years of the economic sanctions on the regime. So just starting from 2011, we know that, the government is so much in need of, doing economic, or enter into the, global communities. That's where they started to initiate reforms. And we started to really telling the international communities that they got to be, careful. They got to go step by step to also match action, to action or conditions or preconditions that really have to be met before, you re-engage with the regime or, the, semi-civilian government. But actually, things doesn't turn out the way we want. People want, and that's where even in these reforms today, ethnic people are still marginalized, are still excluded from the reforms, and many of the what's developed, developments that come in now is really benefiting the army and the cronies. And then, recently we have heard about the U.S. delisting of the cronies from the SDN list. So this is, again, when we look at that, whether I would call it a political will or is more like self-interest in a way that, like, instead of like looking really that the country need, that got to be changed, got to change systems, policies, make sure they're inclusive. But sometimes we see them more like the country is more like protecting the interest and in a way advance the corporate interest in other countries, and looking at changing the country's rule and regulations or policy that really benefit the corporate interest. So these kind of things we have seen also in the neighboring countries in the region. So I think that that's quite, for us, a big challenge, like that how can we, at the same time we trying to change the things that we see in the country that really are injustice, at the same time trying to tell the international community to understand our issues, So it's quite a big kind of challenge for us.
Yesterday when we met, and Pilar and Paul, they were discussing their country's realities, and both realizing that they come from extremely rich regions in terms of natural resources, and the parallels were striking in terms of corporate control, in terms of militarized commerce and all of that. And I wonder if the struggles that you're facing in Burma, what are the parallels in Latin America and Pilar, and sort of how do we overcome those obstacles to create more equality?
Yeah, thank you for saying that, because I think that that's one of the main problems we have right now. The interests of corporations are over the interests of the countries, over the governments, over the people. And there is an accommodation of our economies in order to give them the facilities to continue to go on taking our resources and degrading our lands, our territories, our ecosystems, and without any problem, with no problem when they do that. When I think in my region, Latin American region, despite we have this alternative government, the situation is the same. Anyway, the transnationals, the corporate, are taking our lands, are taking our resources. Despite we have Evo Morales, Maduro, Correa, all of them, our resources are taken by the corporations. And this is a real problem. And this is why I was asking, what can we really do in this situation? And but it's more than that. People are exposed by hydroelectrics, by oil exploitation, by this extractivism. Communities, entire communities, leaving their lands in a whole region. And we are with our arms crossed. May I say that? Because our governments do nothing, of course, because they are giving the possibilities to the corporates to do that. And I'm sorry, my English is not enough to explain myself, but maybe you understand me. And there is another big problem in our region, is violence. And the way that violence took place in a whole, in every country in my region. Mafias, narcotráfico. We have a mafia controlling the migrations from Honduras to United States. Every step the migrant people goes on, they are controlled by mafias. Women treated, not treated, but mafias controlling the women, the life of women to sexual exploitation. People exploited, labor exploited by these mafias in the route of the migrant people to the United States. Violence took our lives. Even, I can tell, our minds. Violence is the now violence is a method. It's a methodology to solve the conflicts. It is strange to say that, but it is real. We don't know how to look for solutions for our conflicts. We use the violence to solve our conflicts, even in a daily life. So I think that we should work on cultural transformations against racism, against sexismo, against discriminations. People live under discriminations. Indigenous people, Afro-descendant people, women, youth, older people. So I think it is important to work on cultural transformations. Every day we have to work on that, especially patriarchalism, which is very deep in my region, as you maybe know very well. Maybe you have seen Mexican movies. Maybe you have heard Mexican, Colombian, Peruvian songs talking about against women. Our dignity is, ¿cómo digo, Bill? Destroyed sometimes because of just the way of expressing ourselves every day. So, of course, I know very well that I was in the economic structural problems, and I went to cultural transformations. But at the same time, I think this is not a distance in all this spectrum. This is the same thing, individualism, this system gave us. We are part of that. Of course, the first step is transforming ourselves. But here, I guess I don't have the need to say that, because all of you are part of this comprehension, understanding, and you all. I said to Annette that I think if every one of you could say what you have been doing in your lives, this space is an incredible richness of thinking, of changing, of transformation. So we really need people like you in our countries, and we really need to transform our cultures. This is the first step, I think.
Muy bien. I think that's a perfect segue for actually from hearing about all the experience, the wealth of knowledge that we have gathered here today.